guys, today we're going to read Frodo, the Witches, because there's two things in it. This book is different. This book is now pink because I like this one. And the second problem is I'm not going to show you it. I'm just going to read it to you. Because, I'm going to read it to you because it's blurry. When you guys read it, it's very, 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 very blurry. So today I'm going to read. Okay. So I'm going to sit down and you guys can relax and do anything you like. Okay. So, what are we going to do now? I asked her through the tears. You will stay here with me, she said, and I will look after you. Aren't I going back to England? No, she said. I could never do that. Heaven shall take my soul, but Norway shall keep my bones. The very next day, in order that we might both try to forget our great sadness, my grandmother started telling me stories. She was so wonderful, storyteller, and I was affected by everything she told me. But I didn't become really excited until she got on the subject of witches. She was apparently a great expert on these creatures, and she made it very clear on me that her witch stories, unlike that most others, were not imaginary tales. They were all true. They were the gospel truth. They were history. Everything she was telling me about witches had actually happened, and I had better believe it. What was worst? Far worse was that witches were still with us. They were all around us, and I had better believe that too. Are you really being truthful, Grandma? Really and truly truthful? My darling, she said, you won't last long in this world if you don't know how to spot a witch when you see one. But you told me that the witches look like ordinary women, Grandma. So how can I spot them? You must listen to me, my grandmother said. You must remember everything I tell you. After that, all you can do is cross your heart and pray to heaven and hope for the best. We were in the big living room of her house in Oslo, and I was really forbid. The curtains were never drawn in that house, and through the windows I could see huge snowflakes falling slowly on, and Mother was tremulously old and wrinkled with a massive wide body which was smothered in grey lace. She sat there like majestic in her armchair, feeling every inch of it. Not even a mouse could squeeze in to sit beside her. I myself, just 7 years old, was crouched on the floor, and her feet wearing pajamas, dressing gown, and slippers. You swear you ain't pulling my leg? I kept saying. Listen, she said. I don't know less than 5 children who had simply vanished off the face of this earth, never to be seen again. The witches took them. I still think you're trying to frighten me, I said. I am trying to make sure you don't go the same way, she said. I love you and I want you to stay with me. Tell me all about children who disappeared, I said. My grandma was the only grandmother I ever met who smokes cigarettes. She lit one now at a long black cigarette that smelt of burning rubber. The first child I knew who disappeared, she said, was called Rangel Hansen. Rangel was about 8 at the time, and she was playing with her little sister on the lawn. Their mother, who was baking bread in the kitchen, came outside for a breath of air. Where's Rangel? She said. She went away with the tall lady, the little sister said. What tall lady? The mother said. The tall lady in white gloves, the little sister said. She took Rangel by the hand and led her away. No one, my grandma said, ever saw Rangel again. Didn't they search for her? I asked. They searched for miles around. Everyone in the town helped, but they never found her. What happened to the other 4 children? I asked. They vanished just as Rangel did. How, Grandma? How did they vanish? In every case, a strange lady was seen outside the house just before it happened. But how did they vanish? I said. The second one was very particular. My grandmother said there was a family called Christian. They lived up on Holmenkollen, and they had an old proud of. The painting showed some ducks in the yard outside a farmhouse. There were no people in the painting, just a flock of ducks on a grassy farm yard, and the farmhouse in the background. It was large painting and rather pretty. Well, one day their daughter Solveig came home from school eating an apple. She said a nice lady had given it to her on the street. The next morning, little Solveig was not in her bed. The parents searched everywhere, but they couldn't find her. Then all of a sudden, her family shouted, "There she is! That's Solveig feeding the ducks." He was pointing at the olive painting, and sure enough, Solveig was in here. She was standing in the farmyard in the act of throwing bread to the ducks out of the basket. The father rushed up to the painting and touched her, but that didn't help. She was simply a part of the painting, just a picture painting of canvas. Did you ever see that painting, Grandma, with the little girl in it? Many times, my grandma said, and the position in the picture. One day she would actually be inside the farmhouse and you could see her face looking out of the window. And day she would be far over to left with a duck in her arms. Did you see her moving in the picture, Grandma? Nobody did. Wherever she was, whether outside feeding the ducks or inside looking out of the window, she was always motionless, just a figure painted in oils. It was very odd, my grandma said, very odd indeed. And what was most odd of all in that picture, that as the years went by, she kept growing older in the picture. In 10 years, the small girl had become a young woman. In 30 years, she was a middle-aged. Then, all at once, 54 years after it all happened, she disappeared from the picture altogether. You mean she died? I said. Who knows? My grandma said. Some very mysterious things go on in the world of witches. That's two you've told me about, I said. What happened to the third one? The third one was little Birgit Svensson. My grandmother said. She lived just across the road from us. One day she started growing feathers all over her body. Within a mouth, she had turned into a large white chicken. Her parents kept her for years in a pen in the garden. She even laid eggs. What colour eggs? I said. Brown ones, my grandma said. Biggest eggs I've ever seen in my life. Her grandma was a mouseless out of them. Delicious they were. I gazed up to my grandmother, who sat there like some ancient queen on her throne. Her eyes were misty grey, and they seemed to be looking at something many miles away. The cigarette was the only real thing many miles and was the only thing about her at that moment, and the smoke it thing about her at the moment, and the smoke it made billowed around her head in blue clouds. But the little girl who became a chicken didn't disappear, I said. No. Not Birgit. She lived on for many years, laying her brown eggs. You said all of them disappeared. I made a mistake, my grandma said. I am getting old. I can't remember anything. What happened to the fourth child? I asked. The fourth one was a boy called Harold, my grandmother said. One morning his skin went all greyish yellow. Then he became hard and crackling like the shell of a nut. By evening, the boy had turned to stone of a nut. It turned into a stone. Stone, I said. You mean real stone? Granite, she said. I'll take you to see him if you like. They still keep him in the house. He stands in the hall, a little stone statue. Visitors lean their umbrellas up against him. Although I was very young, I was not preparing to believe everything my grandma told me, and yet she spoke with such convincing, with such smile, and with never a smile on her face or a twinkle in her eyes that I found myself beginning to wonder. Go on, Grandma, I said. You told me there was 5 altogether. What happened to the last one? Would you like a puff of my cigarette? She said. I'm only 7, Grandma. I don't care what your age you are, she said. You will never catch a cold if you smoke cigarettes. What about number 5, Grandma? Number 5, she said, chewing the end of her cigarette as thought it was a delicious as Peru was rather an interesting case. A 9-year-old boy called Leaf was summer holidaying with his family on the fjord, and the whole family was picnic and swimming off some rocks of those little islands. Young Leaf dived into the water, and his father, who was watching him, noticed that he stayed under for a usual long time. When he came up the surface, at least he was not Leaf anymore. What happened to him? What was he, Grandma? He was a porcupine. He wasn't. He couldn't have been. He was a lovely young porcupine, she said, and as friendly as could be. Grandma, I said. Yes, my darling. Did he really and truly into a puzzle? Absolutely, she said. I knew his mother well. She stayed with them all afternoon, giving his brothers and sisters ride on his back. Then they had a wonderful time. Then he waved a slipper at them and swam away, never to be seen again. But Grandma, I said, how do you know they turned into a puzzle? Was it actually leaf? He talked to them, my grandma said. He laughed and joked with them all the time. He was giving them rides, but wasn't there a most tremendous fuss when this happened? I asked. Not much, my grandmother tremendously fussed when this happened. I asked. Not much, my grandma said. You must have think. There were all witches around. There's probably one living in a street this very moment. It's time you went to bed. A witch wouldn't come in through my window in the night, would she? I asked, quaking a little bit. Silly things like climbing up, breaking into people's houses. You might quite safe in your bed. Come along, I'll tuck you in. And that's up to page 18. Bye.